Hey folks, how you doing? This is the Cardboard Capo here. Welcome to my inaugural video. This will be my first video I make of many, hopefully, covering the Union Arena card game. This first one here is going to be a deck profile. Obviously, according to the thumbnail, it's going to be my yellow Gojo deck I've been working on for a while. Pretty happy with it. It's been having a pretty good win rate. There's a lot of things to talk about it. But before we get to that, I just wanted to say thank you if you clicked on my video. Apologize for the poor quality compared to other channels. I'm going to be working on it. It's a learning curve, but in my searches around looking for Union Arena content, I found that it's a little bit lacking. There's not a whole lot going on, at least not a whole lot for the English side of the game. There's plenty out there for the global, but I want to do my part and make a little bit of English content for this game because, surprisingly, when I got into this game, expecting it to be a side game, and I ended up really liking it for some reason. It's really surprised me because I had sworn off Bandai games a while ago, and here I am with another one, and I actually really like this one. So enough about my background there with Bandai games. The rest of my background, as far as TCGs are concerned, I've been playing TCGs for the better part of 2 decades now. Obviously started with Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Back when I was a kid, moved on to Magic, played Magic for years and years and years before getting into Dragon Ball Super, Digimon, and eventually Union Arena. And I'm going to be playing Gundam when that comes out as well. The only Bandai game I haven't played is One Piece, funny enough. Just never was a fan. But yeah, this is going to be my yellow Gojo deck profile, and we'll just get right into it, alright? So, starting off with the zero costs, okay, I got Maki Zen in here. I'm running her at 4 because the main tenet of this deck for me was I wanted as many triggers as possible, and she's a zero cost active trigger, which I found to be very useful. Active triggers have all sorts of applications, the least of which they unsuspend a guy, they can block. This usually will put them above a 4K, which is the average blocker and attacker in this game. But the other nice thing about active triggers is if you get hit with something like a Kugisaki or a Bambi from Yellow Bleach that rests you until the next time you'd be unrested, an active trigger actually takes up that stun, which means you'll be able to untap for your turn or the next untap phase. So it's got a lot of applications. I'm a big fan of the active triggers. Plus, she's a 2K beater out the gate, which is always good considering most zero costs are 15. She's going to be able to attack over any early blockers that people might put out against her. The next zero cost is Nobara Kugisaki. She's obviously in here as a raid target. I am playing the raid Kugisaki in this deck. Again, she has a trigger. She has a get trigger, so if she ends up in your life, she'll just come to your hand. Just your normal zero cost 15k attacker with a get trigger. She's really only here to be early energy and a raid target for Kugisaki. The next zero cost, I have 2 copies of Panda. Panda's down to 2 copies in this deck because he does not have a trigger, and I really want to have as many triggers in my life as possible. He does have step, so he's useful enough to at least have 2 of, but as you'll see, I also run the 3 cost Panda, so there's enough Pandas to be raid triggers because I am running the raid Panda as well. So really, he's only in here to be an aggressive attacker that can step back when I need him to, and 2 extra raid targets for the raid Panda. And then lastly, just 1 extra zero cost, just Asumiki Fushiguro, another draw card trigger, so that's good. It plays into my trigger game plan, and she's got the extra little win plate of choose up to one character in your front line and gains 1,000 BP until the end of turn. So this could be good in a pinch for attacking over a blocker or pushing that last bit of damage, any number of things that you can do. Now, I do run 2 1 costs. I run the Toge Inubaki. This card, I think both Toge's people sleep on, but this one is really nice because it's essentially a double blocker, because as soon as you block with it, you can rest something else once he's sidelined. So they attack, you block, he goes to the sideline, and then you tap somebody that hasn't attacked yet. Uh, he's been very good for me. He definitely helps to slow down aggression, which is good for this deck because you're trying to build up to that 6 energy Gojo at the end of it. So he does slow your opponent down just enough to give you those extra turns to set up your energy line. So he's been very good. The other Toge, not in this deck. He'll probably be in a future deck profile because I do run him in one of my other decks. But he's also slept on as well. I think both these guys are very good. I run a little one of 2-cost Kugisaki. Her activate main is if she's on the front line, you can rest her, and then you could choose something on your opponent's line to rest. She was put in here. She was originally a second Sumiki, but I put her in here just as a 5th raid target for my own Kugisaki. Plus, that activate main is interesting in that you can tap down a blocker and you could get another attacker through, because her being only 3,000 VP, she's not going to get through 4K blockers anyway, so you might as well use her to tap down a 4K. But with that being said, she comes with the extra kind of Christmas Land combo of you tap her to tap down somebody's blocker, and then you raid on top of her. She untaps, and then she taps something else off the raid. So she may actually end up going up to 2, but I haven't pulled off that. She used to be 2, but I didn't pull off that combo enough times, and I didn't have enough time to set it up that I felt like it was something I wanted to rely on. But I go back and forth on it. But it's an interesting combo to keep in your mind for if you play this deck and if you play her in it. Next up is 2 copies of the 2-cost Maki Zenin. She's just your win active, generate an extra energy. So she's here obviously to help on your energy line, get you up to that 6 energy threshold you want to be at. Not much to say there. She doesn't have a trigger, but she is necessary because you need some 2 energy generators in this deck. Next up is the 2 energy Satoru Gojo. If your opponent is playing blue or purple, he costs 1 less to cast, which is nice. So he's just a 2-cost 3K that generates 2 energy on your backline. Nothing much to say about him. He doesn't have a trigger, but he's necessary, again, for the same reason Maki is. You want to get up to that 6 energy line. Next, I have the 3-cost Panda. He's also got Step, and he has an active trigger. Again, I already told you the merits to the active triggers, and he's a double energy generator. So this Panda is actually really good. This is the one you want to see more often than not, and it's even good in your life if he ends up there. You play him down, you can attack with him if you have the opportunity, move him back. On a turn, raid on top of him. He's a very versatile card. He could do a lot, and I like this Panda a lot. And him being an active trigger is just icing on the cake. Next, we move into the 4 costs. We got the 4 Satoru Gojo double blockers. This is your color trigger, so he's obviously being run at 4. The color trigger is nice because if it comes out of life, you can rest something that hasn't attacked yet, and they stay rested through your turn. So color triggers are always nice. Plus, he's a 35K, which is pretty big, even though most of the time people attack with 4Ks. If there is a deck that's trying to rush you down, like a Toshiro sending small things at you, or a Megumi sending small things at you, him being a 35K double blocker is nice. The big thing I like about this card is actually his second ability, where your opponent can't choose him with abilities unless they pay an extra 1 AP. This combos very nicely with a card we'll see a little later in the deck profile that definitely gives opponents some headaches and makes their math really bad. So we'll get to that in a second. Next up in the 4s, we do have Raid Panda running 4 copies. So Raid Panda is pretty self-explanatory. Again, he has Step, which is nice, so if you need him to generate energy, you can always move him back. But otherwise, he's a 4K double blocker with impact as long as you've raided him, because he only gets that 1,000 if he's raided. So if you raid on him defensively and your opponent has a bunch of small things on the field, he can double block for you out of life, which is pretty nice. And then on attack, he's got impact 1. So that's pretty nice for ending a game when you need to get that last damage through. Finishing up with the 4 drops, we got the 4 Nobara Kugisaki raids. She is a phenomenal card. great for this deck. Adds both defense and offense to the deck. What's nice about her is she's essentially a Renji from the Purple Bleach for anybody that's familiar with that deck. The damage 2 part of her is not tied to raid, so you can pay for the damage 2. You can play her on your back line, move her up, pay for damage 2, and attack with her, even if you don't raid her, so she can swing for damage 2 unrated. But if you do raid her, she gets to tap something down, and it remains tapped until the next time it would untap. So that's good. And you'll have to excuse me. I know I'm saying tap a lot. I've been trying to say rested, but I've played Magic for a long time. So just if you hear me say tap, it means rested. So just know that's what that means. I don't mean to confuse anybody who might not be familiar with the Magic terms. But again, yeah, Kugisaki, offensively, she can tap something down to get a blocker out of the way, to push some aggression. Or if she comes out of life, you could choose to raid her, and then she can tap down an attacker. So she's a very versatile card, very good 4K attacker, damage 2, and has both offensive and defensive utility. Finally, the kind of the marquee card of this deck is the 6-cost Satoru Gojo. He's 2 AP. He's the only 2 AP card in this deck, but he is very good in that he doesn't feel like a 2 AP card. He's a 5K with impact, which is nice on its own, but he allows you to draw a card, one, which is nice in a color that doesn't have a whole lot of card draw, and he lets you reduce the AP of the next card you play by 1 from your hand, which every other card that's going to be in this deck is 1 AP. So he's essentially letting you cast something for free. And this is any card, not just characters. So you could play a site card, you could play an event card, you could play a character card. It doesn't matter. It's just a card. It minuses the AP cost by 1, and in this deck, it means it's going to be functionally free. So you could use him to cast your Hollow Purples, which you'll see in a little bit. You can use them to cast a Panda. You can use them, and it applies to raids too. So if you wanted to raid your Panda for free, you could do that. We'll move into the event cards now. I am running 2 Curse Technique Reversal Reds. This card I see, in most of the deck lists I see people run this or they don't. People seem torn on it. I've been torn on it, whether to keep it in or out. I do like it because it's another active trigger, and active triggers are always nice. And having it here to play in a pinch, just to move a blocker out of the way, is nice. It comes with the added benefit of if your opponent's energy line is full, when you push that 4K or less guy to the back line, they have to remove somebody from their energy line to make room for it. So it is technically removal if they have a full energy line. It can also be played for free off Gojo, and it does get a blocker out of the way. So with all those things together, I do think this card is worth playing. So just to reiterate, you just choose a character with 4,000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and move it to their energy line. Very simple, get stuff out of the way, kind of pseudo removal, can be played off Gojo, is an active trigger. All those things together, I think, earns it its spot in the deck. The next is a site card, 4-cost Unlimited Void. When played, choose up to 1 character in your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. It will not switch to active during start and end phases while this site is on your field. At the end of each attack phase, if Gojo is not on your front line, you sideline the card. Now, this is a very good card that can keep something tapped down for pretty much perpetuity until you lose your Gojo on the front line. And that's where this Gojo comes in. Because he's such a difficult card to remove, because you have to pay extra to do it, you can sit this Gojo on your front line and be like, okay, if you want to get rid of my Unlimited Void, you're going to have to pay extra for it. So he combos with Unlimited Void very well, and he makes the math very poor for your opponent. And by the time you play this, you could even have multiple Gojos on the board. So it could be very hard for them to get through all the Gojos you might have on the front line in order to get rid of this Unlimited Void. I've used this many times. The opponent I play the most often, he tends to run the blue Sukuna deck, and I don't know how many times I've used this just to keep his Impact Sukuna tapped down for pretty much the entire back half of the game. So it's been very good to me. And again, this can be played for free off the 6-cost Gojo. What's interesting about this card, though, too, before I move on, is that it only prevents untapping during the start and end phases. So if your opponent hits you or you hit your opponent and they get an active trigger, they can untap the card that is affected by Unlimited Void. But then once they go to attack with it again, it'll remain rested again. So just keep that in mind. Like, this doesn't keep things rested. It more or less skips the untap phase at the start and end of the turn. It doesn't permanently keep it tapped. So if they have another way to untap something, they can do it to get around Unlimited Void. Finally, we got for the special trigger Hollow Purple, great card. If you have a Gojo on the board, you reduce the AP by 1, so it's a 1 AP, 5 cost removal spell. You use it and you just remove something. There is no BP requirement on it, no prerequisites, it's just point, click, gone. It's very powerful. Most special triggers tend to have some sort of prerequisite attached to them, some sort of BP limit, some sort of prerequisite. The only thing that this requires is a Gojo, and that's only to make it 1 AP. You don't even need a Gojo to play the card. You don't need a Gojo to remove anything. To use an example, I know in Green Hunter x Hunter, I used to play Gon, and if I was using Fishing Rod, not only would I need a Gon on board to actually sideline something, if I didn't, it would bounce to hand, but I would need also a high-level BP character on my front line in order to match that BP to whatever I want to remove. So some cards have a whole bunch of prerequisites to get them to work. Hollow Purple does not, and that's what makes it really good. Even if you have to pay the 2 AP to use it, it's just an unconditional remove that threat. So it's always there for you to use. And finally, and probably somewhat controversial, I guess, is my final triggers. I only run three domain expansions. The reason why I run 3 is because I have, to this day, I think I've hit 1 final trigger in my last life in a game. So I've stopped trying to run 4 thinking that it's going to happen because I felt like there were other cards I wanted to run to maximize my game plan over having that chance at a final trigger. It just doesn't happen often enough that I feel I need to have 4. And having 3, I still see 1 or 2 every game for me to play from hand to extend my turns. So I've never felt like I haven't seen domain expansion at 3, and I wasn't seeing it in my life anyway, so I cut 1 card here to add an extra card into my deck. 3 has worked very well for me. I know some people like to run 4. That's fine. If you wanted to run 4 of these, there was any number of cards in this build you could remove. You could remove the one of Sumiki if you wanted to. You could remove. You could probably remove the Kugisaki if you wanted to. You could go down to 1 reversal red. There's a bunch of ways you could switch that around if you absolutely wanted to have 4 domain expansions. I just know that I was sick of just never seeing it, feeling like, oh man, I hope this final trigger's the last. Nope. And I played a lot of games, and I'm telling you, it only happened once. So I stopped relying on it. But yeah, this is my yellow Gojo deck. It's been playing very well. It could be a little slow to set up if you don't have the right hand. But because you do have a good amount of 0 and 1 drops and 2 drops, you can actually do a fair bit of early damage yourself, especially with Panda being able to step back and forth. I've noticed that if I get off to an aggressive start against Blue Sukuna, I have a much easier time in the game because I can do 3 damage to them early and then build up to Gojo eventually. And by that point, I have the tools available to me to lock down their board and finish the game on my terms. So don't be afraid to push up early with a lot of these 0 drops, especially the Panda since he has step. The Maki's a good attacker at 2,000. Push that Nova up to tap down blockers, and then just work on getting these 2 energy guys on your back line to work your way up to Gojo. Don't be afraid to attack. You got to go in. I know hitting things in life and screwing up a game plan doesn't always feel great, but the good thing is most of the things you're attacking with early are going to be low priority. You don't really need them for raid targets. Your 2 energy panda is going to be in the back line anyway for you to raid into him eventually. Gojo doesn't need any raid targets at all. He's not a raid target. So any of these Gojos you could push up to attack with if you wanted to. I don't recommend the 2 energy one, obviously, but if you needed to attack with this one, you could. And yeah, this is the deck profile. If you got any questions or you just want to chat about what you're running and what works for you, please just leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to be putting out more deck profiles here in the future. The next one I put out is probably going to be my Megumi list, although I may do my purple list. I don't know yet. I'm still working on both of them at the same time, so it's going to be whichever one gets finished first. And yeah, I hope you tune in next time. Have a good one.